All right, everyone, welcome. We are so happy you're joining us tonight. This is the March edition of the Together Women Rise webinars. And before we get started, we've got two great speakers tonight. Before we get started, just a few Zoom reminders. First, please put yourself on mute while our speakers are presenting. That would be very much appreciated. There's going to be a Q&A after each speaker. But if you would just put your question in the chat, then we will get to your question, as many questions as possible after the presentations. And we've added closed captioning feature to the Zoom. So if you want to enable that, you go to your Zoom toolbar and then click on show captions. So that would be another option for you. March is Women's History Month. And tomorrow, March 8th, is International Women's Day. It is the global day when we celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. Tonight, we are recognizing International Women's Day with a very special discussion about the impact of war and conflict on women and girls. And it's a theme that's extremely relevant because of our March featured grantee, and particularly timely because of all the high profile recent conflicts around the world. We know that women and girls are disproportionately impacted by war and conflict in so many ways. They face increased hunger, illness, injury, assault, displacement, and trauma. And there's typically a rise in trafficking, sexual violence, and gender-based violence during conflict. And often the economic hardships force families into the unthinkable of having to sell or trade a child, just for their survival. And despite bearing the disproportionate share of burdens of war and conflict, women are so often excluded from the peace process. We are so lucky tonight because we're starting off with a special speaker who knows all of this all too well. Dr. Jessica Anania is the Conflict Tracker Research Fellow at Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. The Georgetown Institute seeks to promote a more stable, peaceful, and just world by focusing on the important role that women play in preventing conflict, building peace, growing economies, and addressing the global huge issues like climate change and increasing violent extremism. Dr. Jessica Anania leads the Institute's conflict tracking initiative, which monitors and analyzes conflict dynamics through women, peace, and a security lens. She holds a PhD from the University of Oxford, where her research focused on domestic and multilateral response to gender-based violence amidst armed conflict. She's worked for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and the UN Office for Project Services, and has been a consultant to the UA national government. And she is well published in international affairs and a forthcoming article in Journal of Peace Research and International Feminist Journal of Politics. Welcome, Jessica. We're so pleased to have you here tonight for you to share so much of what you've learned in the profound and far-reaching impact of war and conflict on women and girls. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're so thankful you're here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colleen, for the introduction. I'm really looking forward to being with you all tonight and sharing a bit about the new initiative that we're launching, as well as the work that we're starting. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to put some slides up. Let's see, bear with me 1 minute. It's not going to let me share my screen. I'm not sure that I have permission, so that's okay. I have shared the slides if, Wendy, if you do want to put them up, but if not, I can always share them after the fact and just speak now, if that's all right. Perfect. Thank you so much. And you can go ahead and start it. And you can go ahead and go. Thank you. So as mentioned, I'm leading the work that our institute is launching on conflict monitoring. And this is really exciting because despite the prevalence of conflict, despite the fact that we know this is one of the most pressing issues we're facing today, there is no dedicated tool that looks at conflict through a gender perspective or with women at the focus. And so this is really the first resource that we're building that will be timely, rigorous, and available to support the work that everyone on this call is doing and that researchers, policymakers, and advocates are doing in trying to bring this attention to women in conflict. And so I'll speak a little bit first about where this idea came from. I'll tell you about the tracker that we're launching as the first stage and what we have in store for the rest of this initiative. And then I'll touch on some of the trends that we are observing from the data that we've collected. And we'll leave lots of time for Q&A as well, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. So just a bit of background on, the history of our institute and the history of this initiative. We are rooted in the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. And I'm sure most of us are familiar with this or have at least heard about WPS, but this is essentially born from the resolution passed by the UN Security Council in 2000. And this has essentially created a policy framework and really kind of a leverage to push for women's participation, their protection, and their inclusion in all aspects of peace building, conflict, and security. And this agenda really is centered on the fact that women are disproportionately impacted by so much of the suffering of armed conflict, and that they also bring so much unique value to these spaces of peace building, of conflict resolution, that they're leaders at all levels and need to be included at all stages of conflict resolution. And so we've really based the framework for our tracker on this agenda and are looking across these 4 different pillars to collect data. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. And so what this tracker is doing, we're launching it actually on Monday, March 11th. So you all are getting the sneak preview. I'll be sure to share the link as well with our organizers. So if anyone wants to take a look at this once it's online, you can. But as mentioned, this will be the first updated tool that is tracking women in conflict across 25 different countries. And so this is something that we'll be updating regularly, and it will also feature women, peace, and security risks and opportunities. And these will essentially be either talking points, recommendations, advocacy points, and they're not just based on things that are already very obviously connected to women. These are, unique points that we're making by actually analyzing the conflict dynamics that are happening and asking questions like, where are the women here? How is this impacting women? What is a unique effect that this might have on women or women and girls? And so really using that lens to look at conflict broadly rather than just the things that might obviously be connected to women and gender. We also look at conflict status. So at what stage of conflict is the setting? We don't just look at countries that are already amidst war. We're looking at countries that are also at risk of escalation, which can be a really powerful time for intervention, especially on gender issues. And we're also looking at countries that are moving away from conflict. So countries that might have a peace process or have, in effect ended the war. But as I'm sure we all know, that is oftentimes a very murky status. And so conflict doesn't just end cleanly. And for many women and girls, those after effects can be brutal. And so also tracking those countries as well. And the indicator that I'm most excited about is we also are keeping track of WPS trajectory. And so that essentially is looking at more than 80 different qualitative and quantitative data points that my team is collecting. And we're looking across those to see is women's status in this country as it relates to conflict getting worse, staying the same, or getting better? And we really see this as not only being able to trend forecast to see what countries might be, on the precipice of an escalation of gender violence, for instance, or women's repression, but can really also show these cross-national trends that I'll turn to in a moment, where we see, for instance, backsliding. And I think it's really striking that with our countries that we're tracking, as I mentioned, we have 25. More than half have a worsening women, peace, and security trajectory, meaning that in more than half of those countries, in the context of conflict, it's getting worse for women. And that's obviously a really concerning pattern to observe. I'll go ahead and move to the next slide and start talking through some of the trends that we're seeing. And Colleen already raised several of these issues, and I'll go into a little more detail on them, but she's right on the money with what is, a pressing concern right now. And the first thing is the persistent threat of conflict-related sexual violence. And this is really striking. We're seeing an increased scale of conflict, and we're also seeing really weaponized uses of conflict-related sexual violence. And so this is something that not only, just happens during conflict because of, precarity, uncertainty, weapons, things like that, but can really be tactically used by combatants in ways that are actually intended to advance the war effort or as a weapon. And so it's really concerning to see conflict-related sexual violence on this scale and with this level of brutality. And I'll talk about a few different examples. So if you go to the next slide. One country that is very much on our radar is Haiti. And I'm sure many of us have seen the headlines or have heard about what's happening in Haiti with escalating gang violence. But what you often don't see in the coverage is how gendered this is. So with Haiti, around 80% of the capital, as of this week, is held by gangs. And there's active efforts for them to topple the government. There's been a complete collapse of the rule of law, essentially. And what we're observing is that gang members and different warring gangs will actually use rape, particularly and gang rape, as a way to control territory. And this is very deliberate, and it's very clearly documented. And so when they're moving into different parts of the city, essentially what they'll do is use sexual violence or the threat of sexual violence as a way to force populations to flee. And so this is very much connected not only to the armed conflict, but also to the humanitarian crisis, because so many of the people who are displaced are women and girls who have actually fled their communities to avoid this. And so this is such an important dimension of the conflict, both in terms of the dynamics of the war, of the conflict, but also the need and the humanitarian need that's there. Go ahead and go to the next one. Thank you. Another conflict that I think is really striking with this issue is Ethiopia. And I think this really illustrates something that we're hoping to showcase with the tracker, which is this evolution of, you have countries that are in conflict and then you have this transition. How is women's status actually affected? Because for many women, it is not getting better. For some women, yes, but for a lot of women, the resources still aren't there to actually recover from the violence or from conflict. And Ethiopia is such a striking example of the need that still exists. So there was a 2-year civil war in the Tigray region, something I'm sure that many of us heard about. And sexual violence was a very, very big tactic of war. It was super widespread. The data shows that more than half of women and girls in the region are thought to have experienced gender-based violence during the war. And so an absolutely staggering level of need. And the resources just aren't there. And so you need to have really robust healthcare response, humanitarian aid. So many women and girls might not be able to live in their communities due to stigma from sexual violence. And so this really illustrates how even when the war ends, there's so much to be done still in terms of supporting women and girls. And go ahead and go to the next one. Thank you. Another trend is women's continued exclusion from peace processes. And I think something to really emphasize here, as I think one of hopefully the biggest takeaways from my presentation, is that there is so much research that shows that women are an asset to these processes. I can cite like 10 studies that tell you that, women strengthen peace agreements, Women make peace agreements last longer. Groups that have women's organizations involved are more likely to actually reach an agreement during peace negotiations. And so women are a huge, huge asset to these processes. And we do have really positive examples, like ongoing talks in the Philippines right now between the government and a communist armed rebel group where women are involved. But too often they're still excluded. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. One really prime example of that is Sudan. Again, as we all know, there's a civil war happening. And I think this example is so shocking because women are very obviously in leadership roles in this country. In 2019, women led the pro-democracy movement. There's a huge network of women activists, of women peace builders that are on the ground giving humanitarian aid in women's groups and community organizations, but they're still being excluded from these talks. And so this is a huge advocacy point, I think, for people working on these issues, because women definitely do not belong at this table and have the experience and the qualifications to contribute so much to these talks. And you can go ahead and go to the next one. A third trend that comes out of the work we're doing and the analysis we're doing across all 25 countries is the global backlash and backsliding on women's rights. And I think this is probably something that we've all seen outside of conflict zones. This is a global issue, but conflict is intimately connected to backlash and backsliding when it comes to women's status. You often see after conflict almost this enhanced repression of women. It's kind of this strengthening of gender roles at times, especially if women have taken on new roles during a conflict as, as combatants or as leaders or as workers. You'll see this sort of backlash happen afterward. You also have a really close relationship between autocratic or authoritarian rule. So really kind of dictatorial governments will often use women or other groups as kind of scapegoats, or there'll be this kind of strengthening of control over their rights. And so that's something we can observe around the world, but definitely an issue in conflict zones and countries transitioning from conflict. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And I think this is an example we're all familiar with. So obviously there was the 2022 movement, social movement with Women, Life, Freedom, women-led, extremely powerful to witness the pro-democracy movement in Iran. And unfortunately, we've seen just a complete backsliding on any of the progress that seemed to come out of that. The recent election on March 1st, we saw a hardline conservative government win, which means it's about to be a much greater repression of women and of male allies who have been protesting. There's new laws that allow security forces to crack down on women with different tools and with more brutality. And so it's a really, really concerning development. And I think one where we definitely don't want to let global attention slide. This has been a 2-year struggle from that movement, and women are still fighting for their rights. And I'll go ahead and go to the next one. And finally, the last trend that we're observing is this continued need for accountability and reparation. And I think something really interesting with this point is that it's not just traditional justice in the sense of a trial. Of course, that's an important issue, but we're also seeing creative ways of thinking about justice where women are really able to more clearly and directly benefit. So reparations are a huge thing here, where there's opportunities to pay out directly to survivors of sexual violence, for instance, or women to really enhance their quality of life, help them support their children, access healthcare. And so we are seeing these new ways of thinking about justice that are really promising, but there definitely needs to be more of that. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. And so I think a great example here is what's happening in Iraq. And so Iraq is really at a turning point when it comes to justice and women. There's been a UN-led investigation into ISIS that's taken years, and their mandate just ended. So they're turning over all of this evidence, all of this documentation of rape and sexual slavery to the Iraqi government. And there's concern that that might just disappear. And so now is a really big moment for the international community to be advocating for justice to be done with this evidence and with these resources. And with that, there's also new laws on the books that allow, basically unlock support for the Yazidi community, which was the minority religious group that was targeted by ISIS. a lot of sexual violence there as well, and other similar groups unlock new resources for the women there to go home and begin rebuilding their communities. And so those laws need to be enforced. We need justice and accountability using this evidence and protection of the women who came forward and gave their stories and gave their evidence. And so really a turning point when it comes to accountability for women moving on from these violations. And so you can go ahead and go to the last slide. Conscious of time, I'll go ahead and wrap it up with one final thought, which is that something that really struck me. I know I just shared a lot of really sobering trends. It's a dark moment in some ways for a lot of women around the world, but something that did really strike me was that while we were building this data out and building out this tracker for every single country, we were able to find a WPS opportunity. And there's a huge range of them. They go everywhere from women's, grassroots organizations and the work that they're doing to ongoing trials or truth commissions that are investigating violence against women, women in positions of power. We were able to find at least something for every single one of these countries. And so even though these trends are really dark in many ways, that there are these bright spots of hope. And, for me, that was just such an encouraging thing to see across the 25 countries that we're tracking. And I'll go ahead and stop there. I think I went a minute or two over my time, but I'm very happy to answer any questions you have about what I've shared, about the work that we're doing, about this tracker. And like I said, it'll be online March 11th. So please feel free to use this as a resource or to stay updated on any of these countries.
That's great, Jessica. And we'd be happy to, when we send out the recording for this event tomorrow, if you have a link that they can go to on Monday, we'll be happy to include that. Yes, there are questions for sure. So the first one is, how did you go about collecting your data on these countries?
Great question. So we basically developed what I call the framework. And so this is essentially those 80 different indicators that we collected data on across the 4 pillars, and then with intersecting themes of violent extremism, climate change, and cyber and technology. So we basically looked at everything ranging from, the number of women in the national parliament to collecting qualitative data on patterns of sexual violence or, technology facilitated gender-based violence, online harassment against women in the country. So we went on a deep dive. It took around 8 months to collect that starting data. And that's something that we'll also be maintaining monthly. So the information is always current.
Now, I don't know whether you can rhyme them all off, but there are questions about which countries are in that 25 group. Someone has asked specifically if Sudan is in there. I mean, if you have them in front of you and you can name them, that would be great. Or
I can tell you them. So we have Afghanistan, Central African Republic, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Haiti, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Kosovo, Lebanon, Libya, Mali, Mozambique, Myanmar, Niger, Pakistan, Israel and Palestine, Philippines, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, and Yemen. And something that I didn't mention during the presentation, but that I think is a really exciting next step of the initiative, is we'll actually be launching country-specific pages next. So right now, our website for the tracker is just this map. It's an interactive dashboard map, and you can click on the different countries to pull out that information I talked about. But pretty soon we'll have essentially hubs for each of these countries that we'll be building out in the coming months with resources, connections to women's organizations on the ground, resources, everything you could possibly want to know about women and conflict in that setting.
great. So there's several questions here about is there something that individuals can do to help this situation? And a related question about whether there's specific legislation here in the US with our Congress that we can advocate for related to women and gender violence and conflict.
Great questions. So with what can be done, my advice would always be to turn to what local women need and what local women are saying. Part of, I think, the value of this tracker is that hopefully it can be one tool to amplify those calls, but I would definitely say take your cues from what women in that country are saying. There's a ton of amazing women's organizations working in all of these spaces, and I'm happy to provide some links as well if people are looking to donate or to just learn more. That's personally how I always try to do that. I think that connecting with and supporting the women on the front lines is always, you know, a really powerful show of support. In terms of the US, we have a WPS National Action Plan in our country. So in the US, we have this National Action Plan that does include references to how we act in conflict, the priorities that we're pushing through humanitarian aid and things like that. I think that it's always good to encourage our representatives to remember that we have a WPS National Action Plan and that women need to be prioritized in conflict and security and peace building. And that is a tool we have that we can, you know, use to advocate for women's inclusion in those issues.
Thank you. And certainly we're going to hear more about a specific organization that Together Women Rise is supporting in the next part of the program. So this question is about, in addition to the horror for the women, what is the impact on the decent men of a community of this rampant weaponized sexual violence? It must affect the men when they can't protect their mothers, daughters, sisters. Do you have any information on that impact?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So part of why sexual violence is weaponized the way it is exactly that. So it is in many conflicts used directly as a tool to break apart communities because it has this just social rupture that can happen between families or between husbands and wives. That is a really clear way that it's used. And it can also be a recruitment tactic. So oftentimes when you look into why men have joined armed groups, you'll start to see narratives around, well, it was because my sister or my mother or my wife was assaulted by a member of the opposite group. And so it can be a way to actually push men into joining these groups, or even just the threat or rumor of that happening to community members of them can push them into those groups. And so something that I think is a really important conversation and often, you know, isn't part of the conversation is the need for psychosocial support and trauma-informed support, not only for survivors of sexual violence, but for their family members, for their communities, that it can really leave a wound that, you know, goes beyond the initial victim or survivor. And so that's more and more part of the conversation of the need to really deal with the healing that needs to come and kind of happen around the direct victim as well.
And we've certainly funded projects like that as well over the years. Can you talk a little bit more about the positive side and what kind of roles do women play in ending conflicts and assigning remedies like reparations?
Yeah, a great question, and always glad to talk about something that's more positive when it comes to this topic. Women are so active in all spaces, you know, especially at the grassroots level. We see women doing a lot when it comes to frontline humanitarian aid, both during and after conflict. They are often the only ones able to access certain communities. Something that came out of our work in Syria for the tracker was just how vital women are in places where multilaterals can't access. So groups like the UN or international charities are often not able to access territories if they're held by, let's say, a rebel group or are otherwise kind of no-go zones due to fighting or due to who's controlling that territory. And women are able to access those areas often. So in Syria, when the earthquake happened recently, Northwest Syria is very difficult for humanitarian organizations to access and work in. And it was oftentimes women who were doing a lot of the work of reaching people in these really difficult circumstances. When it comes specifically to justice and accountability, women have really important roles to play. Women are obviously active as lawyers, as, you know, high-level individuals in these spaces, but we also see a lot of women's organizations doing the work of actually helping collect evidence, document these violations. In Ukraine right now, there's women's organizations doing a lot of the work of evidence gathering of sexual violence in the hope of having trials eventually for that. And because local women will trust them, there's more access. It's a really important role.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, this, and there's going to be a couple ways that you'll hear tonight about this very thing, because we now turn to our second speaker. And they're representing, Nancy's here to represent our March featured grantee. So for those that are new, Each month, Together Women Rise features a project that addresses one of the many challenges that are faced by women and girls in low-income countries in the global South. And this month, we're highlighting the organization International Network for Gender Equity and Law. And for short, we're calling it IANGEL. That is its name. So first, we're going to play a short video about IANGEL, and then we're going to have our conversation with Nancy, our guest speaker. But this is one of the ways we are, as an organization, helping on an individual basis. So, Wendy, if you'll play the video, please.
Yes, I'm going to play it. It's going to start with a little bit of just a cautionary message that the video does contain scenes, sounds, and content of a highly sensitive or violent nature that may be triggering for some individuals. And we wanted to just say that out front for anyone who might find the video to be so. It is, though, an excellent video, and we want to hear these stories of our grantees. So we just wanted to point that out ahead of time. All right, so I will share now.
Since the Taliban reclaimed power in Afghanistan in August of 2021, they have issued over 80 separate edicts against the basic human rights of women and girls. Women are largely banned from work, prevented from earning an income to support their families, leading to an epidemic of gender-based violence. Girls above 6th grade are banned from going to school. Women are banned from secondary and university education. Women are deprived of basic rights to travel, to access health care, to express themselves, to play sports, or go to a park. They are banned from participation in public life and are being virtually erased. The systematic dehumanization of half the population of this country of 41 million people is a violation of international law. It is a humanitarian catastrophe and an ongoing crime against humanity. It is gender apartheid, and it must end. IANGEL is fighting gender apartheid in Afghanistan on multiple fronts. In our Bridge project, we are working with women lawyers inside Afghanistan. We are providing a bridge of connection and support for them while engaging them as a skilled resource for women experiencing gender-based violence in their communities. We are also working with Afghan women human rights defenders and a talented team of pro bono lawyers on international legal research, analysis, and developing recommendations to mobilize a more effective response from the United States and the international community to the Taliban's outrageous conduct. And we provide financial and emotional support to brave teachers in underground schools who are educating Afghan women and girls despite the ban.
So I'm going towards my girls, my students. Hello. That's my school. Hello, teacher. Hello. انتوا بيجي ما كرافت ما سبشتم بيخو بس كل مش بس انتوا بيجي
You are great ambition. Go to school again?
Yes. So when you send me the funds, I must give stationery for my every 4 places. And also I'm very happy that I could make a uniform for my street daughters, girls, because of your support. In this month, I could pay salaries of my one place, and also because of my street children, I was very sad because my 3 daughters arrested by Taliban, and they were in prison. So because of that, I searched everywhere. I don't know about them, that where are they. In Afghanistan, every time we face a big problem, but we must tolerate. We don't have any other way.
IANGEL's work in Afghanistan is a force multiplier. Investing in women lawyers and educators provides vital connection and resources for them, for their families, for women victims of violence that they assist, for the girls they educate, to build a community of resilience, to power hope for the future.
I was a student in high school, but Taliban came to Afghanistan and we can go to school. I want to become a designer in the future.
IANGEL's work to develop new legal research and recommendations, to name and shame the issuers of the edicts, to hold the Taliban accountable, and to develop new policy recommendations can shape the future for an entire country and for the world.
Really, I can't express to you my feelings, that how much I'm very happy from you. Thank you.
IANGEL is powering hope in Afghanistan. We are deeply grateful for support from Together Women Rise.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm so pleased to be able to introduce to you tonight Nancy Newman, who is the founder of IANGEL. She's currently a partner at Hanson Bridget LLP in San Francisco, where she specializes in real estate and commercial litigation. As an attorney, Nancy has worked with other women lawyers to promote gender equity through Queen's Bench, which is a women's bar association in San Francisco Bay Area. And she has expanded its influence on legislative and policy initiatives and collaborated with other bar, professional, and women's organizations to strengthen the movement for equality in law and society. Nancy has been speaking and networking and advocating for gender equality in law and society for 25 years. In 2013, she founded the International Action Network for Gender Equity and Law to harness the power of pro bono legal services and to connect its projects to advance gender equality locally, nationally, and globally. Nancy's powerful leadership and commitment to equality is inspired by her mother and grandmothers and rooted in her determination to leave a better world for her daughters. Nancy, thank you. We're so glad you're here. So can you take us back to 2013 when IANGEL started, and why did you start the organization, and what need were you trying to address?
Well, thanks so much, Colleen, for having me, and thank you so much to Together Women Rise for supporting our work and giving us this forum to explain what we do. I'm really honored and pleased to be with you. IANGEL was formed by a combination of a number of factors. I'm a lawyer in a law firm, and for the first 20 years or so of my practice, I did a lot of pro bono work, but the pro bono work that I had the opportunity to do was always poverty law, very important for lawyers to do, to represent poor people that can't afford legal services. And I did a lot of that work, and it's great work, but it's local and it's needs-based. And as I got older, my tolerance for the slow progress on gender equality was diminishing. I wanted to be more involved in rights work, not just needs work. And when I led the National Conference of Women's Bar Associations, I got women's bar associations involved in international work and had the opportunity to connect with women lawyers in other countries working on gender justice initiatives. And I found that just incredibly inspiring and exhilarating to work with women in other countries. And I realized that we have so much more in common than we have differences across borders, across oceans, across cultures. And I wanted to do more of that work. So I sought out opportunities to do more of that work. And I found them very hard to find. I was looking for an organization that I could just plug into and donate my skills as a lawyer to advance gender justice. And I literally looked for years, like, 10 years, and reluctantly came to the conclusion that I guess I have to form this organization myself. That was not my original intent, but I had this sense of a moral obligation because pretty much everybody I knew believed that in gender equality, believed that women can do anything men can do, and women should have full rights to participate in society. And lawyers all over, pretty much every lawyer I know believes this. And many would happily donate their time to address the injustice in the world if they had an opportunity to do so. But they just did not know how to plug in. There wasn't an easy way to get involved. And it just seemed like there's all this intelligence and power and passion and drive that was on the sidelines, and we have to get it off the sidelines and into the game because, as Jessica said, the world is backsliding. It's going backwards on gender equality. And I am convinced there's more of us than there are of them. There are more people that believe in peace and justice than there are on the other side. But the other side is well-financed and well-organized and marching in lockstep, and our side is kind of all over the place. So IANGEL was formed to provide a way for lawyers to network across borders and work together on gender justice initiatives and find inspiration and more power through the work that we do together.
All right, let's take us now to, International Women's Day 2024. What's your core mission and objectives? And I'm curious what countries you work in too.
So the core mission remains the same: to advance gender justice locally, nationally, and globally through pro bono power and allowing people to connect and amplify voices. We do that through education, advocacy, and facilitating the engagement of pro bono lawyers in projects that advance gender equality. When we were formed, since we were formed in 2013, we've worked in a number of different countries with we connect directly with advocates or lawyers or NGOs in certain countries on issues where we can connect together and advance common goals. So we've worked in a number of countries, but we're very small. So right now, our work focuses in the United States on reproductive justice and, rejoining the struggle for basic personal autonomy and reproductive liberty. And internationally, our work is focused on Afghanistan, which is the single most egregious place in the world to be female. It's horrible. And there's a lot of work to be done, and that's where we're That's where we're focused.
And that's the project that we're supporting. RISE is supporting specifically the Afghan women and girls. And we've been horrified to see what's happened to women and girls in Afghanistan since Taliban took over again. So can you, before we get into our specific project of what we're doing with RISE, can you just talk a little bit more about daily life for women in Afghanistan right now? What's been the impact on their freedom of movement, access to public spaces, or even just public life in Afghanistan?
There is no more public life for women in Afghanistan. It's gone. I mean, that's just the you know, we can read about rights being taken away. You can read okay, they banned education for girls above the age above 6th grade, and they said women can't go to universities. So you can read about that and you can think, oh, that's terrible. But that one issue right there, among many, is worth pausing and considering the impact that had. One edict, and millions of girls stopped in their tracks. They were, you know, they wanted, like the girl in the video, you know, I want to be a designer. They have hopes and dreams and futures, and all of a sudden, well, not for you. You can't learn. You are stuck. And when we first started our work on the legal analysis, our task was to analyze the 55 edicts against women and girls' rights, and now there's 107. So it is a daily deprivation of the right to education, the right to work. Women are allowed to beg, but they're not allowed to run businesses. They're not allowed to be lawyers. They're not allowed to operate a trade. They don't have access to justice. They don't have the right to travel without being accompanied by a male guardian. Mind you, I mean, if you want to know how really stupid this is, like if a woman has a 6-year-old son, she can travel. but not without that 6-year-old son, you know, like it's crazy. So of course that also impacts the right to health care. You know, if you can't, men can't treat women have to be treated by women doctors, but there aren't very many women doctors. Women who are widows don't have a mahram to accompany them. What are they supposed to do? Like they suffer tremendous rates of gender-based violence, no access to justice, no way to be heard, high suicide rates, highest maternal mortality rates in the world, highest child mortality rates in the world. If you don't have health care, you can't travel, you don't have access. I don't know, no right to play sports, of course, no right to go to a park, like it goes on and on. These people wake up in the morning and rack their brains to think, is there any piece of humanity remaining that women and girls can enjoy? Let's take it away. It's that bad. It's a systematic subjugation of half the population. It's an organized institutional framework, and that's why we call it gender apartheid. It is the erasure of women and girls from the right to be human beings.
So let's talk specifically about what Together Women Rise is funding, the project called Powering Hope. I understand that there are 3 components of this project. So can you walk us through these different components and what you hope to accomplish with this?
So certainly, first, we support underground education for girls and women. There are remarkably brave women in Afghanistan who are determined to keep teaching despite the bans. They do so at great
Incredible.
risk
I
to
know.
themselves. When we first, we've been at this a year and 9 months or so, we first connected, and I was so concerned. Communicating with these women on, texting and I, be safe, be careful. I worry because she's sending me pictures, and she's like, "This is where she said, I have to do this. That I have, we are like a bird in a cage, and we have to do this. If I die because I'm teaching girls and women, so be it. I won't live any other way." Remarkable bravery. So we support these schools. We help them buy materials, pay their teachers, pay their rent, and we amplify their voices. And you heard a lot of their voices on the video. They don't want the world to forget. They say the world has forgotten about us. Don't forget. And so we play a role in amplifying their voices. Our bridge project is taking it another step further. Because we are lawyers, we connect with other lawyers. We know that there is a tremendous power inside of Afghanistan of women lawyers who are not allowed to practice law. These are accomplished, smart, capable women, trial lawyers. They prosecuted gender-based violence before the Taliban took over. Taliban took over and said they can't practice law anymore. And not only that, but they opened up the jails and let the abusers out, the people that they had prosecuted. Sorry, I have a motion detector on my light here. And feel free, they told the men they released to feel free to go kill the lawyer that put you there. So a lot of these women are living in fear and isolation. And IANGEL, we have a small group. We're connecting with them. We meet with them regularly, providing support, providing opportunities to connect with other Afghan women lawyers and judges outside, engaging them in supporting their own communities, for women experiencing gender-based violence. That's our bridge project, building real interactions to drive gender equality. And then the third component is really trying to do something about it through the international community. The United States policy has been singularly ineffective in changing what the Taliban do. It hasn't changed materially in years, and that can't go on. If it's not working, fix it. And so we are collaborating with Afghan women's rights defenders and pro bono lawyers to do the research, to put together the pieces to shift the international dialogue and the national policy on Afghanistan. We need more accountability. We need to stop trying to talk to the Taliban and realize they are terrorists. We can't support terrorists. We have to stop the flow of money to them, and we have to amend the United Nations Convention on Crimes Against Humanity to include gender apartheid. It's time. That's what we're working on.
Fantastic. And that leads me to the next question, because your work is crucial for advancing women's rights and access to legal support. So can you elaborate a little bit on the challenges faced by women in Afghan, especially in terms of legal rights and representation? Because it sounds like it's evaporating.
Pardon my French, but it sucks. I mean, they really, they don't have an effective access to justice because, women can't get to the court. If they get to the court to make a complaint, well, they won't be allowed in if they don't have a male guardian. if they're the victim of abuse by their husband, good luck with that on getting the husband to accompany them. If they get another man to accompany them, they will be asked, well, is he your husband? And if not, she won't be allowed in. And even if she's allowed in, by the way their law is set up, she won't be listened to or heard or allowed to testify or I mean,
Yeah.
it's, or they will say it's her fault. And if you don't have a man, well, we'll marry you to a Taliban, to a Talib fighter. So that is a good way to discourage women from ever trying to seek justice. And it's inhuman and degrading, and it has to stop. And our tax dollars are supporting this because a lot of money from the US is going through USAID into Afghanistan for humanitarian support, but it is intercepted by the Taliban, and the Taliban take their cut. And so the real challenge here is finding ways to get funds into Afghanistan that don't continue to empower the Taliban.
So another question, because you talked about safety and your video was very impactful. Is there a concern about the safety for the women and the girls that were actually in that video? I mean, especially the women that are running the underground school,
There is. There is. I mean, it's dangerous. We deal with the security issue as best we can, taking our cue from them. We use pseudonyms when we refer to them. The bridge group all have pseudonyms. We have a little chart so that we can keep track of who is who. Some of them have multiple pseudonyms. So their voices are there. Their photos, they want us they want the world to hear their voices. They want the world to see the photos. They want the world to not forget them. There were a number of photos in the video of artwork from teenage girls in these underground schools. Remarkably powerful artwork. I am struck by those images. But that, and it has not been safe, but they take the risk because they believe in what they're doing. One of the teachers that we support was arrested last year. She was imprisoned. She was tortured for a month. She nearly died. Afterwards, we said, it's not worth your life. But she's back at it. She would not, she was out for, she recovered. She got healthcare through the underground network. And she just says, I can't leave she calls them her daughters, the street children that she works with. But that underscores the lawlessness of this regime. This is not about religion. This is not about religion. This is misogyny. This is gender apartheid. This is lawless men with guns who are determined to erase women in every aspect of life and society. It has to stop. We have to do more about it.
On that note, my last question, because I want to have questions that have come into Wendy. Give us you just talked about a teacher, but have you got another personal story about an individual that has been specifically impacted by your work in Afghanistan?
I would say, our lead on the bridge project, she is just a most remarkable person, speaks multiple languages, and you know, she has felt like a lone voice out in the world. She's raising the flag and sounding the alarm. She's a talented journalist. She's written in publications all over the world under a lot of different names, I will say. And when I connected with her, it was, you know, it's a source of light in the darkness. It's a source of hope. I read what she wrote. I wanted to connect with her, and now we have this bridge group, and we have women who were judges in Afghanistan who have joined from outside and want to be part of the group to talk to those who are still inside. The women inside are isolated, but and in despair, I would say, but our connection with them is a way to say, you know, we're with you.
We know you're
The world
here.
is watching, we're supporting, you know, and we can help them help others and stay connected to the work that they do, using the skills that they have. You know, even if a abused woman could get a male lawyer, the societal features are such that it's hard for them to even explain what is going on. But women lawyers know how to take statements. They know how to make records. They know how to foster, you know, to make a record for accountability and a record for the international community of what's going on. So that's the project that we're doing. And we're going to meet with them tomorrow for International Women's Day, a group of former Afghan lawyers, judges in Pakistan, Afghanistan, US, and meeting with the same women inside. And we have to address whether this is an issue for whether we celebrate or mourn.
Yeah.
It's a little of both, but
Right.
I would say I am so honored to be connected to these women. They are strong, they are remarkable, they are inspiring, and we all gain that inspiration from doing this work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Wendy,
Sorry, it's over. We're over time.
I know, but this is so important. And it's what we can do as individuals to help. Our donations make the difference in women's lives and girls.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wendy, what other questions do
Yeah,
you want?
we'll go to a couple of the questions and then we'll have to move to our wrap up, but I do want to get to some of them. This is the first question, and I don't know whether anyone can really answer this, and it really struck me when you were talking about how women can only go to female doctors. Well, and women can't be educated as doctors anymore.
Right.
So if only female doctors can treat females, who is going to treat women in the future? And as I said,
Nobody.
yeah,
This is exactly, I mean, or what the communities that have no women doctors, like die, you know, you'll just do that. I mean, this is a tragedy, but it's also, it shows you how this policy is, what the Taliban are doing is not sustainable.
Mhm.
No other country in the world has such policies. It's stupid. You know, you can't erase half your population and expect to survive as a regime. So our job is to make this regime's time shorter. I don't know when it will end, but we have to keep it in the public view and increase international pressure for accountability and change.
well, just on that note, I would encourage everybody to go to our social media, to that of IANGEL, and share our post. International Women's Day tomorrow was a great day to bring to light these kinds of issues happening around the world. If everybody would just share our post about the incredible work IANGEL is doing, share the recording of this video when it comes out tomorrow. That's how we can help individually to keep these women so that they're not forgotten. That's my little spiel. But another question, can international courts intervene in any way to help women in Afghanistan?
That's a great question, because I've been wanting to be involved in that. I was thinking, sue their asses. Not that easy, because the international courts don't really have, Afghanistan is not part of any of the official systems. There are pending complaints in the International Criminal Court against the members of the Haqqani network with investigations going back for years and years. And part of what we're going to be looking at is there a way to re-energize those investigations and bring in some of the people who are issuing the edicts now. We're looking at that, but you know, the Americas has the International Court of the Americas, and that's a human rights court, and people can sue there. But there isn't an equivalent for Afghanistan. There isn't really a court that includes Afghanistan as a territory for international litigation. We've looked. But individuals could be held conceivably accountable. But even, you know, our project to name and shame the people who are issuing the edicts, too easy to hide behind the term Taliban. We want to get their names out there and make sure that all of their rights in the international community are curtailed. The whole world needs to turn their back on these humans that are doing this.
Absolutely. You mentioned there's a question about whether Afghani women here in the U.S. can help you. And I think you are working with Afghani women here.
We are. We connect organically. I mean, it's really heartening and wonderful. One of our board members is a Pakistani feminist human rights scholar, and she knew an Afghan woman judge who's also working at Berkeley Law's Human Rights Clinic, and she connected us to her. And then she in turn connected us to her sister in Pakistan. And like and we just got a new Afghan woman lawyer from another law school in the US. There's a lot of interest and people want to help. We're small, but there's a lot of power in this group, and I'm looking forward to checking in with them all tomorrow and keeping it going, and appreciate the support from Together Women Rise, because the funds are desperately needed. You know, the pressures on them. You know, I think we have maybe 9 women in our bridge group, and they are responsible for 57 family members. Like there's a lot there. These women who used to earn a living can, you know, have children and family members and the stress is really very, very high. So we're honored to keep them in the game and work with them.
I think that's all the time we have for
I know.
Colleen, unfortunately.
I would, and it's not here. It's just 6 o'clock, but I know it's getting late on the East Coast. Nancy, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for your work. Thank you for caring, and thanks for making a better world for all of us, your daughters and all of us. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for honoring IANGEL with this grant. It will go very far in Afghanistan. So thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, to close out, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about some upcoming events. And this is very, very important, ladies. Tuesday, March 19th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time is when Together Women Rise, our advocacy group meets with results. And this is our opportunity to change policy. So it was wrong date in the dish. So March 19th is when your advocacy is. April 4th is going to be the next webinar, and I'm excited to say that we've got a representative from the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund who will be here as our speaker. Don't forget, we've got trips coming up in 2024. There's still a little bit of time to register for the Guatemala trip in April. What a great opportunity to understand one of our grantees and a better understanding of Guatemala culture. We're going to Malawi in October, November, Cambodia, and the registration is open now. So go for it, ladies. And also details about the travel is on our website. Join us. If you go on our website, join us, and then click travel, you'll get more information. And also under join us, you'll see more upcoming events. You can look at previous webinars. You can register for webinars. It's a great source. Go to the website, togetherwomenrise.org. And ladies, have a fantastic International Women's Day tomorrow. Let's share the voice. Let's amplify our voices by posting. All right?
Right on, sisters.
Yes, I should say sisters. Yes. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.